A pleasure to meet all at last. And today, this is part 2 out of, well, I do hope for it to be a pretty big season of films I should have talked about years ago. But either way, we're at it with some more films worth talking about. Now, one in particular that I'm going to be talking about for today is going to be focusing on somewhat real-life things that have happened. Even though this actually takes place during the present day, the likes of 2008's Tropic Thunder is just impressive. I mean, this was actually something that might as well be the unique pinnacle of comedy in the late 2000s. And while we have some incredible comedy today, some people will look back at this one being a piece of its time more than worth watching today. Because one could argue that the likes of this film just might be a piece that is, in fact, only funny because it was 2008. And maybe that is true even to this very day, but as many of us will know, there's not a lot going on based on problems. Problems with race, problem with gender, problems with anything really, because this film just goes above and beyond in terms of offering a lot of comedic relief towards a number of different graphics. For example, you have yourself an all-star cast. A lot of memorable names: Robert Downey Jr., Jack Black, Jay Baruchel, Matthew McConaughey, Nick Nolte, Tom Cruise, Steve Coogan, Ben Stiller, Danny McBride, and of course, Bill Hader. This was of course a year before Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and all that good stuff, but in any case though, there's just a lot that we could talk about the cast. I especially am a big fan of most of these actors, so this film is more than covering anything by the book, the way I see it. Another thing that's really unique about it is the fact that it actually goes as far as to make fun of Hollywood. Now think about it. This was 2008. Long before the infamous trial between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So, and we know how it ended, right? Johnny Depp's famous quote, "Hollywood is truly a lost cause." So, that's pretty much what sealed it. Independent filmmakers are truly thriving now, and better yet, there are newer developers, producers, companies, etc. There's all that talk about Warner Brothers and Paramount and all that stuff, yada yada yada, but you probably get the idea. These bigger companies are just not looked after very well. Anyways though, what Tropic Thunder does at first is it gives us a unique, inspirational look at some incredibly funny commercials, advertisements, and of course trailers for in-film films. Well, case in point, there's this entire family of fat people that love to fart in each other's faces. And there's also this weird Forrest Gump ripoff called Simple Jack, which, according to the plot, was one of the worst box office bombs of all time. It might as well be inspired from the likes of various other horrible films out there, like Geely, Cutthroat Island, or Zizek's Road, or we could even talk about Jaws: The Revenge. These kind of films that flopped so bad, it's hard to even mention them, by word of mouth or otherwise. But the thing is that Simple Jack was the unique idea that likely took inspiration from such films like the ones previously mentioned. And with all these other commercials and trailers that went down, it was in fact coming from an in-universe filmmaker whom wanted to create a new project. He wanted to create his own comedy film based on events from the Vietnam War. However, the studio wasn't really about to let him do all that. So, here's what he did. He took it into his own hands and allowed for his entire cast and crew to go out into the country of Vietnam and hopefully create a new Vietnam War in his own image for his own cinematography and entertainment. The idea was to have the actors believe that another war was taking place in Vietnam, so that way he could film everything and then create his own film based on these little events. However, something ends up going wrong, and the guys are basically stranded in the country of Vietnam with little to no understanding of what was going on, or even worse, little to no understanding of what's really going on. And we're not just talking about this botched plan that had somehow been severed, but eventually we get to a point where we do understand what's going on here. But first, I might as well talk about a couple of different things. Robert Downey Jr., of course, is well remembered for playing a guy called Kirk Lazarus. Now, Kirk Lazarus is seen as an incredible actor according to the plot and the lore that this film establishes. However, it was later revealed that he eventually went through some sort of skin pigmentation transformation, which allowed him to become more black. So no joke. Robert Downey Jr. took on a more black man appearance instead of just staying like his white man self. And even worse is the fact that when you understand he's Australian. Yeah. Kirk Lazarus is an Australian man whom decides to become black, just out of the blue. No explanation why or motive for it, but it does actually give us a bit of a diversity check. So that way we understand now why these films nowadays just diversify within all means. But that is, of course, just coming to understand the fact that most of the other guys are white. So I guess by any means it made sense to add somebody who's black just as a means of creating more rhythm into it. But I just cannot see the fact that it would work today. Because who in their right mind would ever give somebody that kind of operation? To make them look different? To make them seem different? I don't know any surgeon who'd be okay with that, or dermatologist. I'm at least sure, though, that no such operation exists in real life. And if there is, you'd better hope that I am merciful against them. Another thing to look forward to is that the reason why Simple Jack was mentioned throughout this whole thing is because of Ben Stiller, Tug Speedman, whom this character, by any means, had starred as Simple Jack themselves. What's even crazier is that while the film was a horrible flop in many ways, it somehow caught on to the locals in Vietnam. Yeah, no joke. It's later revealed that the Vietnamese natives happened to be a fan of Simple Jack. And when Speedman eventually ends up captured by these militia agents and hostile individuals, they want him to recreate some of those famous scenes for their entertainment. To which he reluctantly agrees after hesitating a bit. And as for the rest of the guys, everybody that tries to formulate a plan on how to get Tug Speedman and how to find their way out of Vietnam, it eventually gets down to the point in which that communication is established with the United States and elsewhere about how things are rolling down there. And once the moment does finally come around, well, the director and company, as well as majority of people that are out there, including some that managed to make it out alive, our cast and crew make it out of Vietnam with Tug Speedman by their sides, and more importantly, everybody else who was put in through this horrible, intrepid mission to try and make a movie based on the Vietnam War, but in a whole new way. We also get the bit of self-realization that Kirk Lazarus admits that this whole thing about him being black was actually just another role that he put together. Apparently he was wearing a wig the whole time, and I don't know if the pigmentation thing was fake either, but I guess we'll just leave it up to the plot to decide that point. So in any case though, all these actors and all these other people that we saw over the last 90 minutes or so of the film, we truly got to understand why this is considered an incredibly tumultuous piece of comedy. But let's remember, 2008 was a different point. This was a point when the economy was at its worst since the Great Depression in the United States. It was also at the point in which that year would eventually be a big point in history when Barack Obama would become president later on. And then, as you probably know by now, lots of other things that happened that time as well. It was not a good time to be alive, but we at least had some memories worth talking about today. And this, of course, was one of those things. So I will say that the story and plot was pretty unique, and the comedy is just ramped up to an 11. So with all that in mind, and all the fake trailers that I can possibly rewatch over and over again, we'll go ahead and give it the benefit of the doubt and just give it a good 7.3 out of 10.1. So it excels greatly in comedy, and storyline and acting is pretty good as well, but I can't quite say that it's a great film for a number of different reasons. It's 2025 now. There's a lot of people out there who would be rather sensitive about who they are, and they will take a lot of pride in who they are, as it seems. So I feel like that wraps things up for today's piece, but come next time on Films I Should Have Talked About Years Ago, I will have something else worth talking about. So make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.